So, Greg, golfing, you and I, we've gotten to play quite a few times. Tell us about your game. I mean, it's gotten better, but I think what I'm curious about is what do you think is one of your worst moments in the game of golf?
That's a very good question. You weren't playing with me last week, or maybe you take back the initial comment. Embarrassing moments. I have a couple. I will, for the sake of maybe sharing a story about my brother, I'll go with this one.
Okay, I like it.
So we all know the moment you're like 20, 25 yards out from the pin. You got to chip onto the green. It's a wildly easy chip, something that we could all do. We've all done before. And what do I do but thin the ball? This ball goes directly at my brother and nails him, not just in a bad place, but in the shin, probably one of the worst places for it to go. And my brother, let me give some background here.
It's a little debatable if that's the worst place it can go, but continue.
Fair. He was a center for TCU, so football player. We're built very differently. Okay. He's standing on the other side of the green, looking at me in just pure frustration, just like absolutely furious. And all I can do is laugh. And so I don't know if that's the worst, but I'm a little embarrassed to tell you some of the other ones. So that one we'll go with, and I just continue laughing. He eventually gets over it, and we move on and we keep playing. But he ended up having a massive welt on his shin from this, again, just easy, just day-to-day chip, and can't even hit that. So again, maybe not the worst, but I'll save the others for off.
Hey,
off the
I think what matters is you keep trying out there, and it sounds like you and your brothers still get along, and so that's a real win.
That's exactly right. There's another man that I hit with a golf cart. I haven't talked to him yet
since
then, so we won't go with that one. But that gives you some background. There's plenty of stories, unfortunately.
Let's be honest. Life's messy. Decisions are complex, and it's not all black and white. But these are the decisions that shape our growth. Welcome to The Tension. Let's get into it.
Well, everyone, welcome to The Tension. Today, we have Greg Rosner, who is actually the VP in 49 Financial over Charlotte and Jacksonville. If you ask me, in 5 years, it'll be over the entirety of the East Coast. So watch out, world, for when you're listening to this, because we're recording in 2025. It'll be fun to see where it goes. Greg is one of the best men I know. He's got 2 young kids, a loving wife, getting it done at home, getting it done at work, and has become one of my best friends. And so this one is going to be really fun for me. Because we get to talk about a subject and a tension that I think most of us struggle with and most of us kind of think about. But frankly, I've not found anywhere where we're having this type of conversation. So you know the tension. We want to bring that to you. So what is the tension we'll be talking about today? It's the tension of looking back at what your parents taught you. All of the good, all the things maybe you wish you could change. How do you actually apply that, honor them, make decisions as you get into adulthood and as you have kids, you get married and all these things? How do you apply those things? But also, how do you then drift into your own self, right? So how do you honor while also becoming your own? It's a hard tension for all of us to manage. I know for me, as I think about my story, there's so much I got from my mom and dad. And there's so many good things. There's so many things I decided to change, but those did affect decisions. And so we're going to just dive into that because Greg's story, as you'll hear today, is full of a ton of wisdom. So Greg, welcome to The Tension.
I appreciate it. I'm looking forward. This is a topic that the more I think about it, there's just so many avenues. I don't think one episode does it. So someone else is going to have to do another episode on this same topic.
But, or we bring you back. We're excited. Okay, Greg. So where I want to start with this tension is just kind of give us a background of Greg Rosner. Like give us your upbringing. And I don't know if you want to go there now, but I know in that was filled with some trauma. There's a lot of good times, a lot of hard times. And so if you can even just give the listeners your background and some of the things you saw, kind of memorable moments you saw, from your mom and dad growing up, I think that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, I would say I had more of a pretty unique background. I've always been described as an old soul. And
I agree with that, by the way. Old soul, young man hair and beard.
That is, and hopefully I keep that. But yeah, always been described as an old soul, and I think that a lot of reason for that is because my upbringing. I had an amazing upbringing, so this wasn't like underprivileged. Any of those stories. My parents set my brothers and I have two older brothers up very well, and being able to go to school and leave with no debt and all those things that. To be honest, in some ways you kind of take for granted growing up. I think there's a lot of really good lessons that they taught us, but what was unique about it is my father was actually 70 years old when I was born. So my father.
That's unique. And let's make sure. What was the age again? Because this is unique.
70, so 70 years old. So to put it in perspective, most people who I was friends with had grandparents younger than my father. And to give some other perspective, my father was in World War II.
No way. That I didn't know.
Yeah. So World War II, he went into the military right after school from the Northeast. And so you think about that, growing up, to me, it was normal. And he had this whole career and been really successful. My mom was in her early 40s when she had me. So there's a significant age gap between them, but she was also kind of older, but very much, a little bit more of a normal situation. And so I got to see them kind of navigate their careers again, but very differently for my father. And I saw two, now looking back, very driven people, very willing to make sacrifices for their kids and be there and support in the ways that they could. But then there were also some challenges of life getting in the way, and that my father, ironically a little bit, was an optometrist. So he spent his entire life working with specifically kids with learning difficulties and how your brain and eyes develop, but basically to eyes, and then lost his vision when I was late elementary school, early middle school. And so you start to think about the kind of, I think, actually in a lot of ways, security that created in me, because I went through the struggle of having to navigate people, kind of giving you a hard time that your dad's as old as that. And, he's kind of like grandfather age, and he's not coaching our sports teams and all those things. And so I think that hard at that time created a lot of security in the long term. And then, we'll continue to get more into this, but then as life progressed, ultimately I was 19 years old, and I was at Texas A&M when I got the call that he had fallen and was in the hospital, and shortly after that passed away. And so I think navigating that was really unique at 19 years old. It was really unique as well as I'm sitting in a place navigating, where am I going to go in the world? What am I going to do? And now I'm getting to look back and actually probably learn more about my father's life prior to 70 than I'd ever learned before. And so it was really unique. And I think that gives you some background, but then even still today, my mother's now in her 70s, and she continues to work, and she doesn't necessarily need to from a financial standpoint. But she loves what she does. She's passionate about her work. She's very, very present with her grandkids and her kids. I'm sure there's some frustration that I moved to North Carolina right after having the first granddaughter in the family.
Wants you back in Houston.
That is where we are. And so, yeah, it's unique to see highly motivated, very successful, very caring for the family, but the balance of those tensions for themselves, and how do you navigate that for me now that I have two little ones? It's been really interesting.
Yeah, Greg, thank you for giving us the background and just sharing all of that. As I know your story. I know that part of watching your dad as he was aging, but also in that age was kind of in his prime, almost impact years, I think you might describe it. But then he goes blind, right? And so can you just take us back to, you're a younger kid. Like, how did you see him try to still like have the impact, right? And do the things that he felt like he was put on the earth to do? But then being blind, my guess is, as an optometrist, it's more difficult to do your job, right?
Yeah. Without a doubt, it's more difficult to do your job. Yeah, you would be shocked by this, Travis. My family, we are not necessarily a words of affirmation family. Yeah, not a shocker. But my mom the other day was actually in Charlotte, and she was like, "You just remind me so much of your dad and how you
Wow.
approach everything." And it is a huge compliment because I really, really admire him, and I admire him because of exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think all his life, right, he really went after what he deeply cared about. So, for instance, the situation I'm most close to is he started a school for kids with learning difficulties in Houston called the
Wow.
Joy School, and it's interesting. There's a family with some young kids that they were having trouble in the public school system, and he couldn't find the right fit for them in Houston in terms of a school, and they'd come to him because of his specialty and all those things. And instead of saying, no, or, let's just settle for this school, blah, 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 he said, you know what, let's start one. And I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure this out, and we're going to get the teachers to come do it. And so he did all of that. And that was in his 70s. There's a picture of him on the opening day of that school, and he's older than most people are when they retire, and he's starting a school. And so it was really unique to see. But then that led to even when he lost his vision. Another thing he did was write books for teachers of students with special needs, and how to teach them to overcome these learning difficulties. And he was in the middle of a book, and his eyesight started to go. It started to go pretty rapidly. And so all of a sudden he's in this place where, okay, well, now he can't finish that either. Driving is no longer a possibility. And I can remember coming home from school, and he had actually one day hired a scribe to come basically just type for him. And he would sit in his office and he'd tell him what to type, and then he would have him read it back to him, and then he'd edit it. And he was just so determined to finish this book, and had so much pride in his work, but also just importance of what he could leave a legacy in for these different kids and these teachers and all the things that even at that obstacle where, again, now he's in his, late 70s, early 80s, and he's still not giving up. It was, again, just what a great example of, sometimes you think, wow, I have it hard, and I'm sitting here, and behind my screen is downtown Charlotte, and I'm sitting in a great office, and I have great people that I work with. And boy, it's like, I don't have anywhere near the obstacles.
Wow. Yeah. And I think, it's so interesting. The people that seem to leave the biggest legacy on the world, they were never driven by the money. They were never driven by maybe even the acclaim, and the approval and all the things that I know I get tempted to be driven by every day, that I have to watch out for. But it's just it's really neat to hear that in his 70s, he's like, yeah, that's the right time to start a school, right? Or vision goes, bring in a scribe, right? And so as I think about what that must have taught you, back to the tension we're talking about today, thanks for giving us some background, but let's fast forward. Greg Rosner, we're sitting here today, May of 2025. Talk to me about what if some of that has influenced big decisions in your life so far? Coming from that really, what sounds like beautiful legacy, that it sounds like you want to live that legacy on. Your mom's even saying you're just like him. Do you have a few points where you're like, hey, these are points I can start to see that I'm kind of living in that tension of, I want to honor him, still becoming myself, but I want to carry on some of that legacy.
Yes, I think there's actually both the good and the bad. The good is, even sitting here today, I had conversations back in 2020 with you about the idea of starting this office, which, by the way, looking back, kind of makes no sense because I was brand new to leading
COVID.
a team.
You know what I should do? Get on a plane with my family and move.
Yeah, I'm first time leading a team, and I'm like, Travis, I think I need to open an office. 6 months
to a place I've never visited.
Yeah, you're like, so why Charlotte? It seems like it makes sense. So, it makes sense. But I think it is this, right? We didn't know anybody in Charlotte. I had been here 0 times before committing to here or Nashville. And then I'd been here once after committing to here. We didn't know where we were going to live. We were new in our marriage. But you kind of look at some of these things and it's like, I don't know, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day and someone made the comment of, we all know what the end of our lives are going to look like. And I think that experiencing my dad has like made me look at the world in a bigger picture view. So even like experiencing the loss of that has made me reflect on like what really is important in life. And so isn't our job to go make the middle chapters like really, really exciting and do these things?
Come on.
And
make the middle chapters. Love that.
And I think that I remember sitting there with my wife, Nina, at the time we're newly married. We didn't have any kids. Until we actually, the week that we announced that Charlotte was opening is when we found out we were pregnant. So that was kind of interesting timing as well. But it was like this chaos. It was like what was meant for us. And so I'd actually say originally why we moved out to Charlotte, going back to the original question, was I would say it was personal. It was, let's challenge our marriage. Let's put ourselves in a place to grow in our faith. Let's put ourselves out of our bubble of all the family and friends that we've known forever that are here in Austin, or at that time there, in Austin. And then, wow, what an opportunity. We can also grow a business there as well, which is going to challenge me to learn skills that I know are going to be needed for where I want to go in my career, and all those things. And so, in a very good way, I think the reason why I'm sitting here today is influenced by my father and seeing him really go for things because he believed in the impact and what could be and what really matters in this world. I think on the negative side, I've shared with my team here that I think the first, especially the first 2.5 years of Charlotte, and you live this and experience this, boy, the amount of anxiety and stress and insecurity I felt in those years, and definitely, a little regret of moments that while I was physically present, I wasn't like mentally present with Wesley, our daughter, as she was growing up, and the first couple of years and those first little moments, because you're just so stressed around some number and some data point that you got to get done. And just stressed in a way that I think there's really good parts of stress, just to be clear, but stressed in a way that it was like, it doesn't matter that much. Like, that's not why we originally moved here. We moved here to challenge our marriage. And so maybe we were just living that out, but I think there's been negatives to it as well. Cause I think my dad, I would say, had borderline obsession with the things that he was trying to do. And I think I have that as well. And, funny naming here, but I think that's a tension that I'll have to manage for the rest of my life. Because, you care so much about what you do, which is great, but also has a shadow side.
So good, Greg. Thank you for going there. And I think that, I think if we're all honest, the thing that is the greatest strength, which for you, I know people are probably already jotting notes down as they're listening to that, because there's something to be said of that. Like, it's our job to make the middle chapters great. I mean, that's sticking with me, but also just this idea that you went out there and you took on something hard on purpose. Like, not many people, Greg, I'm sure you know this, would say like, we went there for the challenge. We went there because it would up our adversity in our marriage and in our life, in a world that I think we're all sure of is an American dream that is chasing the exact opposite. So while I hear that you're getting that from your dad and your legacy, that's kind of legacy pulling through, which is, I think, is a beautiful thing. And maybe talk to us about, like, you just mentioned anxiety. You mentioned being vulnerable around just like maybe not being as present at home when you're in those stressful situations. Like, was there a moment, was there like a North Star moment? Was there practical things you're doing? Like, walk us through, like, the Greg we're talking to now is thriving, right? Both personally and professionally. And I think that's really beautiful, but it's been such a journey. You asked for adversity and you got it. And so, like, how did you get through it on the darkest of days? Like, do you have advice for folks?
It's a really good question. I don't know if I'm qualified to give advice, but I do think I've recently come out of a season that was really challenging. And I think a lot of it was the struggle of identity being so caught up in work. it's kind of like, I've heard people say you don't really know if you're loyal till you've been through a hard time, or like you don't really know your values until you're forced to make a hard decision, and then it creates clarity around your values. And I think that for me, as I was in good times and having successes in my career, and everything was going well, I was still finding my identity in work and in my career and in how people saw me on my team and my successes and all those things. But it was kind of easy to hide behind because it was all going well, And then it was like when I went back to square one of, okay, now I got to like kind of restart and building out an office here and all the logistics, and that stuff doesn't happen overnight. And I think it just shined a light on the fact that my identity was being found there. And so I think while there are still challenges that we have as an office today and a lot of things to overcome, it's just I see them for what they are, and they're challenges. And by the way, we'll solve those challenges and then we'll find more challenges. But it's not an identity. And so I think because of that, right, it allows you to say almost like a healthy compartmentalization of, okay, so I faced my challenges at work, and now I have to go face my challenges at home. And they have their, fun, sides to them. It's not like all doom and gloom at, challenges all the time. But it's, I think you can compartmentalize because it's not everything about who you are. You're not so caught up in it. But I think my number one piece of advice is it takes intentional reflection and time and work. But I think most importantly, it takes time. I don't think there's this like one solve. Yeah, exactly. And I think we all look for that because we'd love if that was the case, but that's just not how it is. And I think you have to just kind of sit in, well, here's where I am. And then you kind of one foot in front of the other, walk your way out of it. And then you have to be cautious not walk back into that too, is I think the challenge.
Yeah, well, and I don't think that that's said enough of what you're spitting is the truth there, right? Which is just the simple, like, I just had to keep looking at myself, figuring out where my identity was off, give it time, and frankly, one foot in front of the other, just keep doing that thing every day. And it's funny, on this podcast, we've heard this word identity, I think, in every episode. And it's so funny because when we go to the macro here of talking about tensions, right, part of what it feels like we're learning on the podcast is just this idea that you actually can't manage any tension, no matter what the subject is in the episode, unless you know your identity. And so talk to us, Greg, like, we've heard about just your past with your mom and your dad and some of the things that have shaped that identity. Like we've heard through some of the decisions you've made and the struggles you've overcome that have shaped that identity. But like, do you have any other words of wisdom for people out there that maybe are younger or maybe even older that are saying, the thing I'm missing is I don't have what Greg is saying. I don't have an identity that then allows me to see myself for who I really think I should see it as. I'm caught up in this thing or that thing. Like, do you have any thoughts of how to find that identity?
That's a really good question. Well, and just to kind of echo what you're saying, one of the things that really clicked with me is I was listening to a podcast, so lots of good learning from other people. And by the way, I didn't say that middle chapters thing. I can't remember who said it, but I can't take credit for it. It did sound great, though.
We'll give credit later in the episode when we find it.
But I was listening to this and they were actually talking about someone did a study. There's like 25 qualities of a leader. The number one quality was centeredness. And I think centeredness is here centered on the right identity. And so, and it was a biblically based podcast, which I think was interesting as well. And so it was, I think that actually was kind of an unlock for me in that season to realize, I'm very much not centered. So I think it created the awareness. But I will give credit to Kyle Sims. He gave a quote, and maybe Kyle didn't say this either, but we'll give him credit.
We'll do a fact check at the end of the
episode. He said, if the path is clear, you're probably walking down someone else's path.
Wow.
And I think that we live going back to that quick fix topic. So to paint a picture here, it is fall of 2013, what is it? 2014, sorry. And, and that was when my dad had an accident. He was in the hospital. I'd been going back and forth to visit him, and it wasn't looking great, but there was just like a mental block there that from the outside looking in, you would have probably been able to kind of tell where things were going. For me, it was like I was blind to it.
Yeah.
And I had gotten a call from my mom that it wasn't going well. So this is just like a really tough week. And I was still in school, and my dad was very big on education. So I was like very focused on school. And I remember getting a call from my mom, and she was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, I don't walk into class, whatever I was doing. And she was like, "Well, why don't you come back home? Matt and I, which my brother, came into town." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "Well, look, I was just worried about you after our phone call the other day." And basically, long story short, I pulled in my driveway, and my mom shared with me that my dad had passed away that morning. And so you got to think about this. I'm sitting there on my driveway in my college house, and we basically pack up my my stuff, and we go back to Houston, and my mom drives my car because I'm very upset. And you sit there and you're like, well, what now? Like, I mean, the path there is very much not clear. And you're just sitting there thinking like, so how does this work? I mean, I remember talking to my dad every day at that point in my life. And I think one of the benefits of having an older father is, and the benefits, right, the bright sides of him losing his vision, he was always home after school. So I would always talk to him after school. So we built like a really, really good relationship. And I learned a lot from him. And so I bring that up because of the point that, right, so you sit in this moment and you're like, okay, I don't know where we're going to go from here. But I now look back at that, and I will say I don't have gratitude for losing my father. That's a terrible thing, and you don't want that to happen to anybody. But I do have gratitude for how I was able to go through that season, the community I had, the lessons that I learned, the perspective that I gained.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that at that time, obviously.
Sure.
But I think you go back to that one foot in front of the other. By that weekend, we were having a funeral, and I had like 30 of my buddies from college come down and come to the funeral.
Wow.
And then the following weeks, I was able to go back to school, and I ended up having my best semester in GPA ever, which was important to him. And I remember like thinking even in that season of like, let's use this as motivation. And I say that because I also have friends. I have a friend that I grew up with that I would say very much went through a lot of adversity in the same way. And I'm sure had plenty of moments where he didn't know what to do. And I got a call a few years ago that friend overdosed on drugs, and he's no longer here. And I spent a lot of time reflecting on like, what's the difference? Because if you met him and you met me, he's more talented. And like everything that we did. And I think the difference was the community. And so I'll go back to that. Like, what's the one lesson? I think the one lesson is you surround yourself with really good people, and like things work out. It takes time. It's not a quick fix, but I think I was super fortunate. Great community of friends in school, great community of friends at home. And then I think I found great community of friends in Austin and in work, and even in Charlotte here, that I think in all of those seasons that are tough, the one thing, or maybe the two things that I'll draw it back to is I think it's put one foot in front of the other, right? You're not going to figure it out overnight, and surround yourself with really good people, and you're going to be great.
Yeah.
But it's not a quick fix.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know this, what's the numbers that are on our chest as we speak, but I mean, it really is. I mean, I think that's what, Solomon meant by two are better than one. Right. And this idea that like,
Totally.
woe to the person that falls that doesn't have anything to pick them up, because it sounds like the difference between your friend and you was you had people picking you up. Talk to me about how, having felt a community pick you up in a way that you've gotten to see a literal life and death difference because of that. Like, how does it impact how you think about success in life? Like, I have to think that totally rocks the scoreboard for you.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge is, right, we're all still so prone to these like external pressures, we'll call them, just society and keeping up with the Joneses and all the things. And so again, it's like you just got to go back to center. But yeah, I mean, I think about it with like with my wife and our kids, and I think about it with our church, and I even think about it with our people here. I think that people need other people in their lives, and sometimes, right, I think they're basically, the way I'd say is there's seasons to be served, and then there's seasons to serve.
Yes.
And I think that the challenge is when you just fall into the external pressures, I'll say, for me at least, I find myself needing the seasons to be served, and then it's very easy to get caught up and not remember the seasons to then serve. But I think those are in many ways probably the most rewarding seasons, and just being able to give to other people and being in such a good place and all of those things. And that's, in a lot of ways kind of, I guess, what makes the world go round. And so I think that having seen that, it just makes me want to be intentional. There's some people that, I know right now going through some tough things of like the consistent reaching out and all those things, but there's also plenty of times where I've missed on that. And I also regret that because I understand the weight of what that meant for that person. And so I think about the guy that I grew up with, and his parents ended up getting divorced. He got pulled out of our school and then came back to our school. And that's why I think he didn't have the community. And I think I'm like, man, like, why didn't I reach out to him? I'd seen him at a wedding like a year prior, and I thought he was doing great, and you just don't know. And so I think it's that. And then I think it's, maybe it's intentional conversation is what we're really saying. It's conversations like this, because everybody wants to listen to conversations like this. But I think having the conversations like this are so powerful for people too.
I couldn't agree more. And I want to go back to something you said that spoke dearly to me, this idea of there's a season to serve and a season to be served. I remember a mentor. Jacqueline was 2 or 3 months into her chemo battle. And I remember like really picturing what would life be like without her. I remember a mentor saying, hey, Travis, you're going to start to feel an identity gap because you are going to have no margin to even think about anything else other than how in the world you get these 3 girls and Jacqueline, like, how do you just try to keep it together? You're in total survival mode. And he made this quote that I thought was really good. I want to give you the quote, and I want to see if this is your experience or not. But he said, Travis, when you're out of that season, when you kind of replay how that day went and you're like, I actually thought about other people. I had a margin to be like, that person might be feeling this way. I should go do this for them. And he said, when you feel that, you're self-reflective enough to feel that, then you know that you're kind of coming into a serving season, and do that with as much rigor as you can, because that's actually will expedite the ability to get out of being served mode that you had to be in. Like, did you, because I felt that extremely. Like, I'll never forget, it was like the 6th month after all that I remember Jack and I had a conversation with someone at church, and I literally left there being like, I should send them a text of encouragement about XYZ. And I remember what that mentor said, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm back. Maybe I have the ability to think of others and like, let me go full throttle. Like, in different areas of your life that that you've gone through that have been hard. Like, if you felt that kind of transition from being served to served moment.
I'm not that wise to come up with that quote, but that's a very good quote. And an idea. Yeah, 100%, because, I think that it's, I think with, I'll use losing my dad as an example because it was the most dramatic. There was a season where I wouldn't have talked about it.
Yeah. Sure.
And then there was a season where I literally intentionally remember thinking, you know what, there's other people that are going through this too, and maybe they need to hear that. And so I started talking about it. And I think about it then even in today, this season. I think I've come out of a season that was really hard, and becoming a dad and being in a new city and building community and trying to start an office and all the things that now I found myself actually doing exactly that. So maybe you're giving me some awareness today of that I'm coming out of that season and in a season to serve, because I've noticed that more recently, that I've been recognizing like, oh, that person's struggling. I can hear it in those comments. And so it's, praying for them or extra communication with them or going out of your way, whatever it may be. I've noticed that more in the last few months, I'd say, than prior. And I think it's probably a lot of that, exactly what you just said.
So good, man. Well, I love that we went there. I think that's hugely helpful. So let's go back to your story. So as I think about all the things that happened with your dad, I've not gotten to hear about your mom, and so she obviously went through all that. So like how did she deal with all that, in as much as you're willing to share, of course? And then how has that influenced some decisions that you've seen? Again, I like what you did before. There's some good and some bad, for sure. I think all of our parents would say that. I know my daughters would say that about me. But how is it watching her go through that, both with the age gap and then also just like living life without her husband and like trying to raise y'all, and just, I'm sure you learned a lot there.
Yeah, without a doubt, I say this in a very endearing way, but I've told my team, if they think I'm stubborn, my mom is, I think, the only person I know on this planet that's more stubborn. So
you got that from her. Okay.
So I did definitely get my stubbornness there. And, but I say that in really a positive way of, you got to think, there was a season where my mom was full-time parent, full-time, working, and then also full-time caretaker for my dad, who was not doing well, and so I think there's, maybe I'll break it down into like three parts of, there's that part of it that you're just like, boy, talk about a season that need to be served, and like the engine that just keep going and keep going and keep going.
One foot in front of the other. Yeah.
And so I think I've very much maybe, learned that from her, the stubbornness of like, you just do not give up on these things and people and all of that. I think number two is I can't imagine what it's like to go through watching somebody like that. Cause now looking back, you got to think of the person that my dad was, and now he can't drive and he can't do anything. And so to watch them go through the like struggle of that, and you can't do anything about it. Yeah. I admire her for that. I don't know if I can relate to it, besides, I wasn't aware. I wasn't as aware of her, or as aware of what was going on at that time. And so, I think getting to see her just consistently show up for our family, gave me my wife and I were talking about it this morning, gave me this like an admiration for what it takes to be a parent and do business and all these things. And my wife paints, and we just had our second, and she's, kind of going through the initial things. And I think she was talking to me this morning, and maybe it wasn't the right response. And I was just like, I think it just is hard. Like, I just think it's hard, and you just got to keep going. And you have to kind of try to juggle all of it, and we're going to mess up, and that's okay. And you just have to have grace. And so, I think that seeing that, but then seeing my mom now, it's been really unique. I mean, again, she's in her early 70s, and it's interesting because I will serve clients, and someone will tell me how old they are, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my mom's like 6 years older than you, and she seems like she's like 15 years younger. So the amount of tennis that lady plays and golf, I think, keeps her young. But seeing her travel, seeing her still work, and getting to hear her talk about how she feels that she's serving others. I mean, go back to that, seasons to be served and seasons to serve. She really feels like why she still works is because she's serving others in her career. And what she does, she's also an eye doctor. But the patients that she's had for years and years and years, and just continue to but it's been neat to see the in some ways weight lifted off of, I'm sure, 20 years, 25 years of burden of managing all of that. And now I'm going golfing on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it may be. And I think that's really cool to get to watch and see. And I think it's a good reminder that there are seasons. So as much as I'm saying I'm coming out of a season, I also know that at some point I'm going to go back into a really tough season again.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's, sometimes you create those yourself for some odd reason, but sometimes you're just kind of forced into life, and you'll continue to go through those ebbs and flows.
Yeah, so neat. Just for everyone out there, I've been here for a lot of your adulthood story. Like, you made this unbelievably, what some would define as risky. I've said a few times on this podcast, you need to define the term risk before someone says I'm taking more risk or less risk in life, because it's all in the definition of the term. But seemingly to the world, you took a lot of risk in starting and doing financial advising, not having a salary. You had all these great offers. Then you kind of get great at that. And you're like, I want to add another job, right? I'm going to go and now lead other financial advisors. And you get to a place where you're great there and you're like, nah, I'm going to go and do this all over again in Charlotte. So you have these 3 moments where you chose these very entrepreneurial impact first. I don't care if it's a struggle. And I almost sense that all of those decisions came from what you learned from your dad. But then those years in between that got you from, I made the decision, to going through the suck, it just feels like you got that from your mom. And so as I'm hearing, I don't know how you'd respond to that, but it just feels like that's such an interesting, it's such an interesting one unfolding your story, how one side of your legacy has kind of taught you to make that hard decision and do it for the impact. And one side has shown you how to endure. I mean, agree, disagree?
100% agree. I've never thought of it like that, but I'm somewhat sitting here thinking, I'm like, what you're just describing is entrepreneurship. And what's really interesting about me sitting here and evaluating, like I had told you why I took the job with 49 over other offers, was basically 2 things. One was I knew you could make a lot of money doing there's a lot of different things you can make a lot of money doing, but I really, because of my father and what I went through, and I think because of my mom and getting to see her still working and still loving what she did, I wanted to pursue something that I really deeply was motivated by.
Yeah.
And I felt like while I'd be motivated selfishly by growth in some of these other companies, and they were great companies, this was a external motivation of, I was motivated by this client being in a different place in their financial situation and in their stress around their financial situation. So getting to see that was like, okay, well, that's going to motivate me forever. And I had experienced that through growing up and different, organizations and all the things. I think then the other side was I really, really believed in community. So the 2 are better than 1 spoke to me a ton. And I think I was reflective on the experience I'd had in the community around me and what that did for me.
Sure.
So by zero means what I have said, yeah, I'm this super entrepreneurial person. And now today I would say I am. And I think to your point, it's because I probably didn't know how to define entrepreneurship correctly, but I probably was raised by 2 parents that I would also say they're both doctors and in education. They would not have said they're entrepreneurial, but actually kind of had that in their heart of how they would go for things that they believed in and how they'd fight through. So it's interesting how that combo, I think you're exactly right. How that combo of seeing the struggle and going through the struggle, but then also the person that continued to go for it and try.
Yeah. Well, Greg, I appreciate that. And I think just for listeners, young, old, whatever, what you have just described for us and what we've done over the last 44 minutes so far has been, you made a decision actually based on the values that you got from your identity, even if you subconsciously made it. So I think that's something just for the young person out there is, I think it's incredibly hard to be like, what's your values at 22? You're like, But that's, I think we need to start telling them it's okay. I think we're talking at them too much instead of bringing them along with, hey, I didn't know either. I hear your story. You didn't know, but your soul knew. And that's why you chose the decisions you chose. And frankly, you endured through all of those things because that was there. And I just think there's just something to be said of what we're hearing is you, Greg, have found a passion. but you found a passion because it was everything your legacy was that you learned from your parents. But what I love about this community side, this is the stuff that you learned in your identity. Maybe it didn't necessarily come from lessons from your parents, but it came from the fact that you went through some really sucky times and other people picked you up, and that taught you something about your identity of, I don't do it alone. Nope. No. I do it with others from this point forward because I've lived it in a way others may not understand. And so I just think that's a really just neat moment for all of us just to consider, like, what's your passion? You should never work a day of your life. Yeah, that's easier said than done. You need a 45-minute conversation unpacking it all, which is why I think what you said before is so good, Greg, of like, yeah, listen, but then what if you did it yourself? What if you unpacked your story each year and said, what are the 3 highlights and lowlights of each year of your life? And then you had to tell someone about it. Could that help you start to shape out what is your identity? Will that make you want to switch jobs or do things? Because as you know, entrepreneurship and community, that's not everybody else's. So, but they need to find theirs, right? Based on, so do you feel like there is, outside of course, this type of conversation, like, do you feel like there's maybe tips that you've had of like, how do you find the people you can be that real with? Because you talk about community getting your back is one thing. Community you can be real with. I think a lot of people are desperate for that. They don't know where to start.
Yeah, I think that it's a really good question. And I think that a lot of like the source of the question stems from, right, the concern of, am I going to be accepted? Am I going to be judged? And I'll tell you, I think, I don't know, this transition has happened in my life or whatever, but I've just like very much decided I'm just going to kind of be me, and this is who I am. And people give me a hard time about being too serious sometimes, but it is what it is. But in seriousness, I think that what I have found in leading people and in building better friendships with, like, even friends that I had in college that now when we talk, it's not like a joking around about sports and whatever. It's like actually a real conversation. Sure. It's interesting because I'll relate it back to this, like, all the tools that track your fitness and all these things. Or you relate it to people going to church. Like, everybody is actually really seeking the truth, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that what we're getting at is, like, all we're saying is have an honest conversation with somebody. And when you think about that, well, everybody is seeking that. We're all paying, literally. I mean, there's businesses
especially
making millions and millions and millions of dollars. Well, you think about all the media, all the stuff, like, everybody just wants the truth. And so when someone asks you, how are you, and you're like, good, how are you? Like, what if you're like, no, but really, like, how are things?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden what comes out of their mouth is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my gosh, you're feeling that. Well, I'm feeling that way. Let's talk about that. And it just kind of leads to these deeper levels. And I think it is just that you're seeking truth. And truly, we all have good days and we all have bad days, and we all do embarrassing things, and we all have weird quirks about us, and insecurities. We all have insecurities, and we're all somewhat figuring out who we are and continuously being challenged by that. And so I think it's maybe the two sides are, one, I think when you seek the truth in what's going on with other people, you often, that's reciprocated.
Yeah, when you seek it in others and with others, you find the truth for yourself. Yeah,
for yourself. Yeah, exactly. And then I think the second one is, and be okay with the fact that, I don't know, it's maybe goes back to the saying of those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind. Of like the cliche, because it is true. Some people are maybe like not going to think you're cool or whatever, but most of the time they're probably going to be really accepting because we're all going through the same challenges.
Come on.
And you just got to be able to have those conversations.
Greg, thank you. I'll ask the same question I like to end these every time, which is, this specific episode is around just this tension of becoming your own person while also honoring the legacy of those that went before you, and taking some of those beautiful things that you get from parents and applying those. As others may have had much different upbringings, right? I mean, the more you know people, the more you know sadness, right? There's just a lot of sad stories out there. But I think for you, is there anything that we've missed today that you say, as we think about this specific tension, y'all, here's my last parting thought of here's how I think we all manage it together.
Yeah, this is an interesting spin, but what I'll close on is I've had a number of people that when I've shared this story to that have also sat there and said, I think what's hard for me is I haven't necessarily gone through any like major moment that's changed my perspective. And my wife and I have often talked about this with our faith in our testimonies. There wasn't this like major one moment where we felt like we found the Lord. And right. I think that's okay. That doesn't mean you can't have values. You can't get clear on your identity. I think intentional conversations can create a lot of clarity for people. But I think that one of the practices that I've learned actually here, but then applied it to my personal life as well, is just like the practice of reflection, and really reflecting on like what happened and how'd that make me feel, and did I like that? Was I energized by that? Why was I feeling that way? And all these things. And that reflection, I think, working out that muscle, because it's not a natural muscle if you don't do it.
Yeah. And it's painful.
Very reflective person. Yeah.
It's painful.
But it doesn't take trauma to create that awareness and create, clear identity and all those things. It just takes reflection. And I think you can learn a lot by building up that muscle.
Yeah, no, and I think that's such a good call out. Everyone is struggling with anxiety. Everyone's struggling, and we can insert all these things. And so, yes, have some been riddled with more traumatic events than others? Yes, and we're all struggling with that. And the only way through is reflection. I have a woman that is a great friend of my wife's, and she taught me the art of going into your notes app in your phone and it's titled I Feel : and you just jot it all down. Then you look at it every Sunday and say, whoa, on Tuesday, I was feeling real anxious. Why? Right? Because you have to have that. And I hate to say it out there, but team, what you heard from Greg is like the only way to get there is by the intentional hard work of self-reflection. And I think that's where it really comes from. So, Greg, what an honor. Thank you for being on The Tension. I have so many takeaways. There's so many little one-liners in there, but there's also just a ton of just authenticity. And I think that this episode will help tons of people. So thank you for just being real with us. Thank you for your lessons. And this has been an awesome episode. Appreciate you, Greg.
Perfect. Thanks, Trav.